As you can probably tell, this is a little bit different of a video than I normally do. And that is because today I'm finally sitting down and I'm doing the video where I'm going to explain all of the differences between the old version 1 trains and the new version 2 trains, but also we're going to talk about how to actually assemble a version 2 train. So the first thing we're going to talk about is actually the changes from the old version 1 train system to the version 2 train system. The first thing you may notice is that although they both had front swivels, as you can tell right here, I now introduced rear swivels on the front cars, and the one thing that I'm really proud of is that this is actually a middle car. That's right, there is no longer fronts and middles. This here is just a single train system unit. This acts as both a front and a middle, and the only thing that changes it is adding the zero car to make it a front, or adding a universal joint to make it into a middle car. And then what will happen then is that back section there will essentially just go over to here. So that's another change, is that the universal joints that used to be on the version 1 train, if the train is facing this direction, this then faces the opposite direction. So you can see the pin is on the opposite side. What that allowed is for me to no longer have the fronts and the backs, right? That means every train system unit is exactly the same. You can use a front for a middle or a middle for a front, and all you have to do is add either a zero car or just attach this directly to the next car in front of it when the universal joint goes off the backside. So it's just a cleaner system in that sense. It's a lot more modular and there is no fronts and middles. It's just easier than it was previously. Now the second thing that really helps is actually the removal of bearings. Now I'm not on about the bearings on the wheels, that's totally separate, we'll get onto that in a bit, but I'm on about the bearings on the front swivel and the universal joint. We no longer need those bearings as they have been replaced by an actually much better system. It's simply these brass threads and then a screw goes in from the top, connects it together, and it allows it to swivel. And every single axle is the same, and obviously because they can't make full rotations, they'll obviously never unscrew themselves and come off. And the brass on the steel creates a really low resistance, low friction system, so they actually are a lot better than using the bearings, because previously the bearings had rubber seals, so it created a lot of friction. So that's where the version 2 is not only slightly cheaper to produce because it hasn't got the bearings, but it's also better. And of course that means that the universal joints, although they are relatively the same as before, they're just a lot cleaner now. They're obviously a bit easier and a bit cheaper to make because they don't have the bearings. The magnets have also changed. I'm using better quality ones now that are a little bit stronger than before, and the sizes are more consistent on the new one. Can't really tell by the naked eye, but if you're measuring them with a pair of calipers, you definitely can. Secondly, to do with the magnets, they're hidden, so from the side you can't see them anymore. They're nice and tucked away. And another thing to do with the magnets, they're not actually glued in anymore, so they can't fall out. I actually do a print pause around here. I insert the first set of magnets inside the print over the top of it, and then yeah, it's just a lot cleaner, it's a lot better. Tiny bit more effort rather than putting glue on there, but definitely works out a lot better. One thing that I did notice that I don't actually have on my list is the chain dog is a lot cleaner than before. It actually moves a lot more freely than previously. Zero cars is one thing that I really wanted to shrink, because you can see how big the version 1 zero car was. It's just unnecessarily big, so I shrunk it down quite a lot, which means when you've got like a zero car design on the top of the version 2, it doesn't sort of show through as much and just sort of looks out of place. Just looks a lot cleaner now. The second to last thing that I wanted to explain before moving on to the actual how to build them together section of the video is actually just the journey of the wheel assemblies, because the wheel assemblies have actually made a big change multiple times since the version 1s. And the second final thing is actually how much cleaner the prints are. You can't really see it on this one because this was actually printed on the bamboo, so these already look cleaner. However, if I get the original version 1, you can see well, yeah, it's a lot cleaner. I mean, yeah, you can really see it there if I put them side by side. This was my old printer, and it took 3 times longer to print one system versus the new one. So you may have noticed that the prices have come down by, I wouldn't say quite half, but they've come down a decent amount since I originally launched the version 1s. 2 main reasons: obviously don't have to use the bearings and the joints and stuff anymore. Secondly, better printers, quicker production time. Thirdly, I don't use SLS anymore. No more SLS. And that's where we're going to move on to next, with explaining the differences that I've made with the wheel assemblies from launch until now. Now, the first change from the original ones, and I don't think any of you ever got these were a prototype piece from the original SLS printed wheel assembly. They look great, and they obviously have support on both sides, but very quickly I found that it didn't need that, and in order to save material and print time, I took the little flange off the side, and I used these for the full production of the version 1s. So if you have SLS ones, these are the ones that you actually got when I shipped the version 1s out. And then from here, I made a very big change and decision in order to bring down the prices and bring down the production cost. I actually transferred all of it over to regular 3D printing. So yes, the surface quality is, well, it's printed by Bamboo, so it is pretty good, but it's not quite as premium as the SLS. But I think people would rather have a good, clean, functioning product at an affordable price rather than paying like an extra $50 for, you know, SLS printed parts. One of the changes that I actually forgot, and I will mention real quick, is you can see that the version 2 is slightly longer. Now, the overall train length isn't that much longer, because what I also did was shrink the universal joint by bringing it further in, and then obviously just shrinking the overall size of it. So the overall train sizes aren't much bigger than before. They are slightly bigger, but yeah, basically why I increased the size is just what's sitting in the background. I mean, I wanted the designs to be a little bit bigger, a little bit cleaner, and a little bit better looking. So if we take a look at these, you'll see exactly what I mean. The one on the right is smaller, it's a bit more difficult to print. The quality isn't quite there. It's not really that good, to be honest. Whereas the one on the left, slightly larger, and definitely with the new printer, it's much cleaner. So yeah, definitely worth increasing the size. And then of course, while upgrading to Bamboo printers, I was able to then start doing multicolor. So much better for the store. Just before we get started with the actual tutorial, I just wanted to very quickly talk about the bearings. So these are hybrid ceramic bearings. They come dry, clean, without grease, and they spin really fast, and they last a long time. However, they're very expensive, and unfortunately I wasn't able to get any sort of bulk order discounts when, you know, looking for them online. So what I've done is I've given that choice over to the customer by saying, look, if you want to put the extra effort into getting cheaper steel bearings, which are honestly about, you know, a quarter of the price, then you can take the rubber seals off, clean out all the grease, and they still run really nicely. They just don't last as long as these ones. Especially if you live in a humid environment. These are made with stainless steel, meaning that they don't really rust or corrode when in contact with humid air, whereas with the steel ones, they're not, because then they're cheap, so they can't really afford to use stainless steel, so they tend to rust and corrode in you know, humid environments. And although you're saving a lot of money from not using ceramics and using like cheap steel ones, they just don't last as long, and there's a lot more setup process, because like I said, you've got to remove the rubber seals, clean out all the grease before you can even use them. Now, in the kits, when you buy them, you'll get everything that you need to have a fully working train, apart from the bearings for the wheels. That's it. And I obviously just previously explained why I don't include them, can't get bulk discounts, etc. But these are the screws, 25mm and 12mm. I've gotten the sizes that I use down to just 2 sizes, so it's nice and easy to distinguish between both of them. You'll also get a aluminium brake run bar and the various track holders that hold them in place. Now the first thing that you should probably know is something that most people probably won't have to do straight away, because I do pre-assemble part of the train before shipping it, and that's to do with the universal joints that connect each car together. Now how you attach these is just behind the wheel axle here you have another brass thread. You get a 12mm screw and you come in from the top, screw that in until the very tip of the screw shows. Probably like maybe 2 threads. And then on the universal joints you have the curved, like the sort of this shaped end, and then that is what goes here. And I find it easier if I just sort of place it on and then hold it with my finger, and then you can get a screwdriver and screw that all the way down. You want to give it a little bit of a snug so that it just doesn't come loose on its own. And because that's got a brass thread, they should be able to swing freely just the same way that the axles do. Every single car needs a universal joint except for whichever car you're going to use for the back of the train, because obviously if this is the back of the train you don't want a universal joint just sort of dangling off the back and hitting into things. So the final car on however long your train is doesn't need one, it's only in between all the other cars. And you can just leave the screw in there, like obviously the screw has to come out in order to then release the universal joint. Didn't lose it. The screw has to come out in order for this to come off, because these can't do a full rotation. But once they're off you can screw the screw back in and then you just won't lose it. And the good thing about these screws here that hold the axles and the joints in place is that once a top design is on top and screwed down, if those screws ever come loose they're never going to come out because they're being blocked by the top design. And of course the Zero car is super easy to just screw onto the end. Screws all the way down. I recommend leaving, well if that's tight I recommend unscrewing it by like 2 turns. Just having it like that. A very simple way of explaining how the wheel assemblies go together. As you can tell, this is a mismatched hole, whereas if I flip the wheel assembly, those ones in the center now line up. So that is the way that it goes together. You've got these two which are further apart, and these two which are further together. The further inwards ones, the ones that are closer together, they are the ones that attach together to make a full wheel assembly like this. Now the assembly process, I would say what makes it easier is you do those first. So you sort of press them in place like so, and then you get the lower one and you can press that in place. They don't always press together, sometimes they do fall apart. It's just, you know, differences in print quality. But then you get a long 25mm screw and you should be able to push it all the way through. Sometimes it can be a little bit stiff, but most of the time it does go through. And then you're going to put another one through the bottom like so, and then you're going to tighten these 2 screws down. And I'm just going to use an electric one just because it's easier. Okay, so now that we have the bottoms fitted to the top wheel assembly, it's now time to put on the main running wheels and obviously the upstop wheels. This is the step where I would say if you for some reason have some bearings that run better than others, I would suggest obviously putting the bearings that run best over on the top. So the bit with this sort of extra hole, that's the top wheel assemblies. They usually don't clip on, they just sort of, you know, hover on, and then you obviously have to add your 12mm screw just in there. And then, yeah, just go through, add them all on. And then obviously these are the bottom wheel assemblies. You need 2 for the top and 2 for the bottom. And yeah, same thing, same screws, 12mm. Just put those on like so. I'm going to quickly go and do all of that and then come right back to you. Okay, so now that the wheel assemblies are fully put together, they are ready for action. Hopefully you should have the right amount of these left. These go in from the outside, so not from the same way as the 12 mils. They go from the other side and they go in just like so. So you just want to put all of those in real quick. And I hope the rest is pretty self-explanatory. They screw into each end of the axle bars. So you may need to get these started by hand. I find that this is usually the best way. I sort of press it against it and then I start screwing, and then I can very lightly just start the process with this. So now that we've got all the screws started, you're going to have a really wide train. These do need to be like right next to it, but we need to put it on the track to adjust it properly. But essentially, you're aiming for roughly about that much gap. You don't want it fully up, because then it's not going to swing properly and it's going to press against the side of the track too much. So you want it to be around maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 threads at most. So I've got this section of track here. So as you can see, it's obviously far too wide because the bearings are slipping side to side off the track. So you just want to try and tighten these up so that they're fairly close, but they don't move side to side like loads like this does. So now, as we can see, it rolls back and forth without slipping off the tubing, but the wheels are still a little bit loose. Now, the looseness of the wheels really depends on how good you can build and also how fast the train is going. I mean, if you're doing just like a small coaster with really tight turns, then they're fine being loose, right? That's going to help you go around really tight corners a lot easier, twists, all that stuff. But personally, I do prefer to keep them a little bit tighter. The only problem is that you've got to be careful about having them too tight, because if they're too tight, what ends up happening is, well, let me just like tighten this one too much, and then I'll kind of show you. Okay, so I over tightened the back one, so you see it doesn't move side to side anymore. Like the front one is loose, the back one's really tight. What that does is it pushes these side wheels against the rails, and as you can see, it rolls, but it slows down really quickly. That's obviously way too tight, and you need to obviously loosen the side bits. Okay, and this is how I recommend having it up. You can see about 1.5 to 2 threads of the screw in between the assembly and the axle, and this gives sort of the perfect amount of play to where it's nice and close, and when the train is running really fast, you're not going to have loads of like shake going on, but it's really smooth. Now, of course, the main selling point of the version 2 train system is the tightness of turns and corners that it can go round. So I don't think previously the default version 1 would have been very good at going round this kind of really tight turn. But you can see the wheel assemblies in action. They're turning, twisting, they're doing all sorts of movements that real coasters do. And yeah, this took me a long time to figure out. And even though I stole these bearings from my old version 1 train, I mean, they're still performing quite well, just rolling back and forth and not really losing much speed at all. These are the hybrid ceramic ones though. And that is it for the tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching. I thought I'd just leave off on showing you some of the designs that I currently have in stock on the store. We of course have a Vekoma style, which you can message me through the store and request sort of any colorway that you want. We have technically a Mack Rides one, so I guess I could change the front sign if you wanted me to, make it look different to, you know, a different coaster type or something. I have Zadra, I have Air Force One, I also have a Steel Vengeance one as well. I just don't have all of the Zero cars done because I'm just about to finish restocking. I currently only have these 3 types of Zero cars currently, but whenever you buy a train, you get the Zero car and top designs and everything included, so you get to pick that upon checkout. I do also have 2 different B&M designs coming. There's one with just like the straight seats and also the staggered seats. I can make those, they are ready. So if you want one, just like message me and request it. I just haven't listed them yet currently. And yeah, that brings us to the end of our full explanation video of version 1 versus version 2 and how to assemble the train. Of course, if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below, and hopefully I should have a wider sort of channel update video coming later on in the week.